Welcome everyone to another episode of Away from the Keyboards, the show that guarantees a 100% placement rate for all your AI agents. Today we are going to deep dive on the recruitment industry and what it means to be a recruiter. So if you get any value out of this episode, consider dropping us a like and subscribing to the show. So without any further babbling from my side, Justin, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So one of the things that I'm always interested about, how did it all started for you? How did you get involved into recruitment and talent acquisition? What is the story behind all of that?
Yeah, I think it's for a lot of people in recruitment talent acquisition. Nobody studies to be in talent acquisition, right? There's no really study. Maybe you can do like HR and then you roll into it, yes. But for me, it was completely different. So I actually studied international business. Towards the end of my studies, I did some internships. I did internships in more online advertising, so something different, but still didn't really feel like that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I liked it, but I also really see it as a thing for me. Let me put it like that. And then actually, a friend of my brother started his own recruitment agency. He's a bit older than I was, and he already did recruitment for an agency site. And he started his own agency together with a friend of his. And they just invited me. I didn't really know them, to be honest. It was more a friend of a friend, right? But they just looking for people who were looking kind of for the first job. And I just kind of interviewed for it twice, and they said, "Sure, you got the job." And that's when I started. So I started off on the agency side, which also a lot of recruiters start on that side of things. And yeah, that's kind of how it all started. I really rolled into it because my friend started an agency, basically. My friend of a friend.
And what was one of the big surprises that you got when you started in this career?
Yeah, so I started off on the agency side, right? So the agency side, I think most people know, but then you're just more of a intermediate, right? You're trying to get people for for different companies, trying to find people. And I was mostly surprised that that's basically just a sales role, more than anything else, right? Because a lot of the focus, at least at that stage, especially also in agencies when they start, they need to get clients, right? So you need to find a way for companies to work with you, and then kind of after you'll try to find the people who kind of join their companies. So a lot of the role in especially agency recruitment is sales, which I found very, very hard. I'm not a sales guy. So that was surprising to me. I think if you ask me later, because after 3 years in an agency, I only worked in corporate recruitment, actually were working for the specific company itself and hiring for those companies. Anything that surprised me there, mainly mostly surprising for me. That's maybe a funny story. I started off on the agency side. My first corporate recruitment role was at bol.com, in the Netherlands, at least a known company. I remember starting there maybe the first day, the first weeks, I don't know, kind of after that onboarding period, and I saw everybody working on their laptop. And that's not weird, but I was just so surprised that nobody was calling. Coming from an agency side where everybody was calling 24/7 and trying to get people on the line, and they were all on the computers writing emails and all that kind of stuff. And I also said literally to my colleague next to me, "Why is nobody calling? What are you guys doing? Why is nobody picking up the phone and calling?" And then I really had to go back. This is a different way where it's more soft spoken and a little bit more easy on the approach, not immediately calling candidates, people you want to work for, work with. I think that was one of the biggest surprises going from agency to corporate. And initially, it was just all the sales was just so surprising.
When you moved into that more corporate role, do you think it's also like the change of going from outbound to inbound? Because what you're mentioning is like before it was very much outbound connection, trying to get someone and talked about it, convince them to coming to work with you, versus being more inbound, receiving applicants and then going about it in that way.
Yeah, huge difference, right? So indeed, you're looking a lot more at people kind of applying. It's a lot more also on employer branding, right? I didn't do any agency. Any agency, you don't do employer branding. Not part of the role. Corporate recruitment, employer branding becomes so significant because you want to set yourself up to be the right company. You have to get the right applicants. So you're looking indeed a lot more at inbound. You're looking at CVs a lot more. Agency side, you're happy to get a CV. On the corporate side, you're like so many CVs, right? So it's a huge difference. I think the quality becomes way more important. If you're kind of on the agency side, you kind of look at a candidate, and yeah, if you're a good agency recruiter, which I wasn't, you have a million companies where you can work with, so you can kind of always see, okay, the CV is okay, but where can I still fit it? For kind of different companies looking for different quality, etc., etc. And the corporate recruitment, you really have kind of an idea already what you need, right? What will work for the company, and then when it fits, it fits, and when it doesn't fit, right? And it's always hard still to tell from a CV just alone. So I think the whole mindset is a lot different. Indeed, you're looking at inbound, you're looking a lot more at quality, you're looking at employer branding. Still, sometimes you still reach out, right? Because LinkedIn sourcing, etc. But the mix is, yeah, very, very indeed.
This episode of Away from the Keyboards is brought to you by you, the listener, and our Patreon supporters. Remember, if you get any value out of this show, like and subscribe. And if you want to support us even further, go to patreon.com/AFKS. That's patreon.com/AFKS. And now back to our scheduled programming. That leads me to one of my follow-ups on that. What is one of the misconceptions that you think people have about the work of recruiters?
This is what I think the perception is of that we just look CVs, just reject, and that don't really do much maybe. And there's maybe a little bit of perception. Maybe how I think the perception is wrong. I think there's a lot into it. So it's not just about screening CVs, just not about employer branding. You're really trying to create strategies over months, years to kind of make sure that the company's not now successful, but also going to be in a few years, right? So I think there's a lot of misconception of what a recruiter does in that sense. So there's a lot also thinking more long-term in strategy. I think this is a metric that's become is already for a while now, but it's getting looked out even more than, for instance, time to hire, time to fill, right? So kind of how long is the role open and how long are candidates in the process. That's metrics that's been around forever. But I think now a lot of quality of hire metric, at least at Catawiki, has been around for 2 years now, I guess. I think every company now has some sort of metric to also look at kind of the quality of the hiring, right? So also looking at recruiters to be responsible for that metric. So you can be fully responsible, right? Because you're not part of onboarding, you don't do review cycles, etc. But making sure that the initial recruitment process that a candidate goes through reflects kind of the quality we need in the company. Those kind of metrics are becoming way more important and also looked up on as a recruiter. How are you kind of doing that? Also looking a little bit more, yeah, it's becoming all these hip phrases, but looking from talent acquisition more to talent management, right? So how are you going to be responsible or looking at the bigger scope of an organization, what kind of teams are there, what kind of quality is there, and also thinking along with the managers, right, on what they will need now and in the future, what's kind of lacking in their teams. I think there's a lot more aspects than just looking at CVs and doing maybe initial screening interviews, which people still know, and rejecting people. Maybe that's also people a lot have the perception on that will probably all we do. So I think there's a lot more to it, especially also the role because I've been doing it now for I think 10, 12 years. Has changed a lot. So yeah, I think the perception of what we do, the little we do, it's quite a bit bigger.
And going back to what you just said about how the job market has been changing and how the role has also been changing, what insights can you share about what have you seen over the last couple of years? COVID was a big change on everything, but besides that, what else can you share?
So I think in the period of COVID, at least for online businesses, which I've always been a part of, we saw immense growth, right? So we saw that a lot of companies were hiring, trying to scale up their teams, especially also in that period after COVID initially, and still kind of, okay, we're going to maintain this growth for the trajectory we're currently on. Nah, that didn't happen. And then you heard a lot of layoffs, right? Around layoffs here, layoffs there. I think from that moment that people really started looking a little bit more, okay, how big are organizations now? Kind of what do we need and what do we need for now in the next coming period? Led I think to a lot of combinations, but that also led to kind of people being more picky about who they hire, right? So I think you saw that a lot more critical on the hiring process. If you can only fill, if beforehand you can fill 20 positions and now you can only do one or two, they're going to be very specific about those one and two, right? So I saw organizations becoming very risk averse. I think to kind of okay, where normally you'd say, okay, this candidate has 8 of the 10 qualities we need, then it was always a yes. And now even if it has 8 of the 10 qualities we need, now we need to find somebody that also has a ninth and 10th. Well, we always say recruitment, the sheep with 5 legs, I think is a Dutch expression, but it doesn't exist, right? The golden goose or whatever you want to call it doesn't exist. There's no perfect candidate. That's the only maybe the candidate that's already in your organization and fully onboarded, etc. So I think companies becoming to an extent maybe somewhat unrealistic of the kind of what can find in people. I think that's really a significant change that we've seen, right? Being super risk averse because you're shrinking and you can only have X amount of positions. I think that's really, really telling of what I've seen over the last maybe year, give or take. After that, kind of that whole people kind of shrinking the organizations, let me put it like that.
And how do you think this whole new hype of AI has been impacting it? Because I get the feeling that a lot of companies maybe on waiting to see where this is going? If this is really going to replace software engineers, yes or no? So should I invest in getting software engineers already? Maybe should I wait one more year? And I have my personal feeling. I think that it's mostly hype and it's not really going to produce anything meaningful. And the companies that are a bit on the fence and don't really get the talent that they need are going to regret it once they realize that all of this is overly hyped. But yeah, think from the perspective of a talent acquisition and a recruiter, how have you seen that play out also in the market?
Yeah, look, my opinion on AI is I think it's a tool, can be a useful tool. Is it going to replace engineers? Not for now, at least. So I think, and then this is maybe a bit scope in the current role I am, because that's of the current company I'm in. I think we are kind of looking still where we keep hiring software engineers because we do believe it's not going to replace software engineers or any type of talent at this stage. What we kind of do look at is somebody kind of pro or against AI. What's kind of their take on AI? So we now kind of put into the process kind of AI acumen, at least being okay with AI and kind of always kind of see how you can use it as a tool, but also kind of having the rule you cannot just use AI as a black box. I spit it in, it spits something out, I copy and paste it, and that's also not the way they use it, right? So kind of setting rules on how to use AI also in the workplace, and this should be reflected in the interview process. We are a keen pro what you suggest in the interview to reflect the work, right? So that should be similar. So also for AI part. So very brief, does it replace software engineers? No. Do we need still software engineers? Yes. I think the only thing that's changed is that we are looking for people that are open to using tooling. And that's also what we're going to assess then in the interview process.
It's exactly like that. I have the same feeling. It is a tool like any other tool that we have. But before we deep dive a little bit on AI, because I want to really get your views on how AI is helping the recruitment world, we have a recurrent segment on the show that is called Pass It Forward, where a guest gets the chance to pass forward a question to another guest. And my question to you comes from our previous guest, Yauke, and he asked, if you didn't went into your current role as a talent acquisition recruiter, what other career would you have chosen?
Yeah, I find it very hard because even going into this role, I didn't know, and all I know what I didn't like was online advertising, online marketing, and that's hard. It just wasn't for me. But still, I maybe reflecting to the dream I still have, and not related to talent acquisition at all. Maybe starting my own business at some point, and more in the hospitality sector. So I have no experience in hospitality. I never was behind a bar. I never worked in a hotel or in a restaurant or any kind. But it's still kind of I find it fascinating to kind of own your own hotel, own your own bar, own your own restaurant, that kind of space. Yeah, it's still sort of a dream of mine. I think it's very cool to own such an bar or restaurant more likely than a hotel. And I don't know why, and I find it so fascinating. But to have that and to kind of make people happy with your food or your drink or that kind of vibe, and then really kind of to serve your customers or your yeah, that's still something that maybe at some point I will give it a shot. Maybe not, but that's would I guess be my answer because I was really when I chose talent acquisition, chose it, just started in it. Was also not really a conscious choice. I think the Netherlands is really bad at hospitality, right? I think they're probably the worst country. If you look at other European countries like Italy or Spain, where people are actually still proud to serve others and make people happy. I think that mentality is not in the Netherlands. Usually, also students doing this kind of job, and they're just like, "I'm doing this. I just want to get paid and go home." Kind of changing that mindset a bit, right? To really making proud to make other people happy in those type of places. So really the hospitality part in hospitality. Yeah, I think in the Netherlands we can do a lot better than starting to try to do that with my own place.
Yeah. So moving from things that are completely human to things that are more AI, how is AI helping you in your current role? Because we talked about how the recruitment you're looking into, also the software engineers using AI, but how is AI helping the recruiter?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different ways that AI can help. I think what I've experienced and I've worked with is more like automated transcription and summary of screening calls. For instance, we use a tool called MetaView. Not super important, but it's super helpful. It helps me not being so focused on taking notes, but actually having a conversation with the candidates. So a big pro of that. We use it for a kind of automated scheduling. So you put all the interviewers you have into another tool, and then it just schedules all the interviews for you, basically, which is great because it's one of the worst things for a recruiter to do. Scheduling of interviews, sometimes with a panel or other kind of stuff, and this tool can do that all for you. It's also a super nice tool. Yeah, you use your Geminis and ChatGPT sometimes for making towards rejection emails, but you also still need to feedback, you need to think about it, you need to read it. So it hasn't been that useful, I think, to also make sure that everything is aligned. But I guess you can the same as you use code, you also need to check it. That you also really need to be really checking because there's some weird stuff in there sometimes. I know we don't do it, or I haven't had experience with it. I know other companies, and I think it's maybe more of an American thing now. They also use it really for the screening of interviews. That there's an AI automatically screening the interviews. Again, I haven't had that experience, so I can't really speak on that. But yeah, there's a lot of tools now out there. Some more useful than others. But if you would, my prime one is the scheduling, because that's yeah, a tedious, non-fun task. I think all the admin stuff in the end. Yeah, not great.
I like how you mentioned that even using something like ChatGPT or Gemini, you need to bring that human approach to look into it, like the software engineer looks into code.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, you have to still say, especially if it's with human contact, and you need to be respectful, right? So if you just copy and paste it and it doesn't make sense, it's not a good experience. So, yeah.
Cool. And going a bit back to your days in the agency, have you dealt with where people just flat out ghosted you during that recruitment process? And kind of how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, I think in the beginning I found it a lot harder when people ghosted me. And I think on the agency side it happens a lot more. Because if you look at kind of people that apply to companies, they are less likely to ghost because they generally are interested, especially for inbound candidates. So I see that happening a lot less. When you're working at an agency, it's quite tough because it's hard to find good candidates and get them allocated. So yeah, it's tough, but in the end, if people don't want, right, you can only do so much, right? I mean, it is what it is. If they don't want, they don't want. And now I'm really more relaxed about it. I mean, if somebody doesn't show up or people are ghosting my emails and maybe say one reminder and then okay, then it wasn't meant to be, right? And the person is generally not that interested, and we shouldn't be forcing anything. I think that whole mindset has changed a lot for me. Yeah, so initially hard, especially if people work on the agency side, it is tough because it's harder. But now I'm kind of okay with it. Working at a product company for so long now, the third product company. Again, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be.
We have a saying in Portugal, is say that you just start getting wider backs and
Yeah.
you can carry everything. So it doesn't bother you anymore.
No, no, for now it's okay.
Cool. And as an industry looking into recruitment and talent acquisition, what do you think that could be done better nowadays?
Yeah, whatnot. No, I think there's always a lot to improve, right? I think still what you hear a lot is that a lot of people are applying to all these different roles, never hear back, and kind of having a very hard time finding a job. I think we need to be super more clear on like why people should apply and should not, because people are putting a lot of time and investment into writing CVs and applying and all that kind of stuff, which is hard, right? And you understand, it's been a while since we're on a job search, but it's difficult. So I think we need to be a lot more clear about what we're looking for, what people companies can expect. So also not create false hope and false dreams, and trying to be a lot better there. I think also being very careful about AI tuning, as we talked a little bit about CV screening. I think it's still a bit of a scary thing to have an AI decide on kind of what's a good CV and what's not. So as said, we don't do it, but I hear a lot of companies do it, and I think that's one of the things can also be a lot better. I Yeah, I think transparency about salaries, working in a company that's maybe not super transparent, but it's not my decision. I think we can be a lot more transparent, right? Also, just to be very clear what companies can do. I think in the US, they're a bit further ahead on that, even where the salaries are a lot more transparent. And we also can differ per state, but you can see that a lot more in the US. I think we can kind of copy that a little bit more towards Europe. Some companies do it better than others. Yeah, there's so many more things.
One of them is probably going to be solved, and I put it between quotes, with the new regulation. I think it's coming next year about the salary being more transparent between the interviews and also within a company. So yeah, it's a good thing on those cases. And as you have a lot of experience within the industry already, how do you go about it when you're coaching junior recruiters or junior people that are working with you?
Yeah, I try to always convey the human aspect, right? So we're speaking with humans, so be very open, very transparent, very direct. I think it's most important when you have bad news, and recruiters, unfortunately, we reject a lot more candidates than we hire, right? So also there to be very direct and transparent, right? So I think for any recruiter coming into this field, be comfortable in giving very direct feedback, very open and very transparent. That's one of the aspects. I think another thing that if you look at junior recruiters, to be. It is a tough role. I don't think people always realize what kind of, that it is a bit of a tough role. There's usually quite a lot of pressures on recruiters for hiring. Yet we have to hire the right quality candidates. Yes, we have to keep up candidate experience, but it's also always measures. Yes, you have to give a high quality of hire. So what kind of my take is, as for junior recruiters, breathe through it. Maybe a bit of an easy thing to say, right? But in the end, yes, it is a tough role. But you hear that a lot. We're also not curing cancer, right? We're also not heart surgeons, where people's lives in our hands. So kind of balancing, yeah, in Dutch is relativeren, but kind of putting it all in perspective. Let me put it like that. What we're trying to do and what we do. So human aspect, we need to be able to put things in perspective. Yeah, I think that those are key things I always like to discuss. And in general, just that's maybe more on their development. I like the junior recruiters to be kind of take ownership, right? So you hear that in a lot of roles, but I also really like that. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, right? Also said a lot, but I think that's the only way to learn, even for junior recruiters. Go to try stuff you haven't done before. Go hire a very senior person, but I've only done, I don't know, interns are now. Okay, go try it, right? So what I think that's relevant. That's for almost all jobs, right? Go try stuff you haven't done before. That's how you learn.
How do you see the differences between hiring managers and hiring, for example, software engineers?
Yeah, I think the conversations are very different, right? So if you look at managers, they have usually a better understanding of what they need, what they're looking for, and what kind of organizations they're looking for. They're usually a lot more particular. But I want to kind of have this culture. I'm not saying software engineers aren't, but engineering managers are a lot more particular. Usually, you're also looking into different compensations, right? So it's higher numbers, it's usually stock options and all that kind of stuff, and it comes a little bit more challenging aspects when it comes to the offering side of things. Then for depends also a little bit on the level of the software engineer, to be honest. They can also vary quite a bit. I think there's different aspects that are different. I think kind of the pitching of the role, what kind of usually certain levels are looking for, the compensation levels that are quite a bit different. There comes a lot of different things into play. And then yeah, and then there's also the difference between people being local, being relocators. Also kind of a different aspects that comes into play. So I think yeah, the type of level location. There's just different things to take into account, and then some roles are a bit easier than others, right? So I think that's yeah, there's quite some variation there.
Cool. During this conversation, we touched several times on having CVs, and that is still an important thing nowadays. So, what advices do you have for tech people with good backgrounds, but they kind of keep on getting automatically rejected or just rejected after a CV screening? What advices do you have for them if they want to improve their chances?
Yeah, I don't have the golden bullet for this, or however you want to call it. I think yeah, and this is might known, right? But cater the CV to the audience, right? So cater the CV to the company. I think there's almost no company or recruiters I know that like CVs of 8 pages. One maybe two max. In the end, if maybe a little idea of a recruiter, I have now a pipeline open for 100 software engineers. Yeah, I sadly I don't have the time to take every CV for 10 minutes, right? It's just the fact, nature of the game. So you need to kind of be very concise in your information and what you want to tell to that company. If the company is in your job ad, you already saw that the company is looking for a software engineer who can take ownership and be leading projects, right? So yeah, then it should be a highlight in your CV somehow that you have led projects from A to Z and you have the kind of leading technical assignments. Simple example, right? But if that's a requirement from the company, then I should be able to read it in that first 2 pages, let's say 1 2 pages. So I think simple things like that is very important. And yeah, still CVs can be very confusing somehow on kind of where you worked at, how long you worked on it, how long you worked at said company. Seems simple information, but sometimes it's still so hard to figure out because they put projects first and then they start to have a weird timeline. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of that because it makes me like a puzzle on that kind of stuff. So I would say make it very straightforward, very simple, highlight the things you know a company wants to see. Yeah, I think those kind of things I can only share. And that's the things I look at as a recruiter. Okay, we're looking for this. How do I kind of see that in your CV? Where have you worked? How long have you worked at that company? Yeah, that's my advice. Maybe very straightforward. Maybe people are like, of course, yeah, but that's kind of what I look at.
Yeah, but simplicity is sometimes forgotten and pushed to the side. And I think it's kind of important because basically you should be able to give the CV to someone that is not you, and they should be able to understand everything that you wanted to put there without asking you a single question.
Yeah, yeah, fully agree. Yeah.
And how do you help a candidate make the right decision for them?
For me, it's really being very transparent about the role, the challenges, and what the company, why it's fun and why it's also not fun. Because what you don't want is people to join and leave, because that's also very bad for you, right? The investment of time and effort into getting somebody onboarded and getting somebody up to speed and all this kind of stuff. If the handler leaves after 3, 6 months, it's really really bad, and also this quality of hire metric goes down. And yeah, it's not all metric is also, but still it is very important. So for me, transparency, also really explaining the downsides of the company you work for, the challenges, and why it makes it difficult, and see if I can how people react. It is very important now to find the right talents even more than before when you were growing. There was multiple positions in your organization, and you can look a little bit around. Saying that that happened a lot, but I think that really really changed. So to help the candidate make the right choice in my current role, at least, is really being very open and transparent. And if it scares them away, or you notice that it's not for them, let's not do it. Let's not do it. I know it's hard. As a recruiter, you want to make a hire, right? Let's that day, but you should really make the right hire. So being very careful with that. I think in previous organization, when you look more at the agency side, helping kind of people make the right choices. I also sometimes had that I had a candidate who in the end had two offers from two different companies. And usually at agencies, you also have kind of clauses that the candidate also needs to be at a company for X amount of time, else we kind of revert all the money or release some of the money when it comes to placing a hire. So they're also being very meticulous about where the person then goes, because you do want people to be successful and stay. Because even if it wasn't about the money, if you place a candidate at a company and he or she leaves after 2 months, even if the money does revert, the company probably won't work with your agency again, right? So I think it's still very important, but it's a lot harder because you don't know the ins and outs fully of the company. You know, kind of what you had the intake with, and sometimes you went to the organization. We went quite a bit, but you don't know all the details. You don't know the challenges as much as you do when you work internally. So I think that's very, very challenging as an agency side to really help them make the right choice. But you try to do your best in that sense. I think now it's a lot easier. I know exactly why not to come from a current company and why it's interesting. Again, I'm repeating myself, but transparency I think is key towards Canada.
That's a great advice for us to end this show today. Again, Justin, thank you so much for coming to the show and having this chat with me. If people want to know more about you, reach out, maybe found about the open positions that you have, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I think my LinkedIn is the easiest. My name is Justin Dan Hamer, Justin Dan Hamer. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I will reply. I will connect. I will need anything you need, and then we can always chat after.
Cool. I'll make sure that I'll add your LinkedIn profile to the show notes so that everyone can find it. Again, Justin, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you too. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed it.
Super. And to everyone still listening, please update your CVs and see you again away from the keyboards.